There's been a lot of discussion recently about vote by mail or mail-in voting or vote from home, as the Democrats have christened it. The Democrats want to push for mail-in voting and spend billions of dollars to fund it, and Trump is against the idea, and that's basically the breakdown of the controversy here. The reason we're given for why we have to do vote by mail is that, of course, come November, the coronavirus is still going to exist, and we don't want people going out to the polls and getting infected. That's the argument anyway. The reason that Trump gives for not wanting mail-in voting is that there's an opportunity for fraud, because it'd be very difficult to protect the integrity of the voting process when people are doing it at home and mailing in the ballots. Now, a lot of states already had mail-in voting. That's a thing that already existed, but in many states, you can only do it under certain circumstances, like if you're elderly or disabled. And even the states that allow anyone to mail in vote, most people don't do that. Now what we could be looking at a potential situation where you've got tens of millions of mail-in ballots. How do you keep track of everything and as I said, protect the integrity of the voting process? Now, here's what I'll say about that. I also am against mail-in voting. I'm against it in general, though, even aside from the coronavirus or anything else. I don't like it. But my reason has very little to do with voter fraud. Yeah, that is a concern. Trump is right. But that's not the primary concern. I think when it comes to the integrity of the voting process and issues that have to do with voting, voter fraud is a much lesser concern than something else that I want to talk about. And it's also true, as others have argued, by the way, that the idea that voting will be significantly dangerous because of the coronavirus is totally absurd. I think we've established by now that you can leave your home and you should be okay. You can go out and do things and still avoid being sick. You don't need to be locked away. In fact, you probably should not be. Not probably, you definitely should not be locked away. So it will be perfectly possible and really not that difficult to have people go to the polls in person and vote and not get or spread the coronavirus. I mean, after all, it's not like people are going into the booth, as groups, or at least they shouldn't be. So we're already socially distanced when we vote. So I'm not really sure I understand what the problem is. But aside from that, aside from fraud as well, and aside from the fact that this isn't even an issue, my problem is that voting shouldn't be that easy anyway. This all goes back to the fundamental flaw in the way that we think of and approach voting in modern culture. We see it as this sacred, universal right held by everyone, and so we have to make it as easy and painless and convenient as possible for people to do it. And any obstacle that's put in the way, any inconvenience that they suffer, any sacrifice that's required of them in order to do it is seen as depriving people of this right, or at least interfering with their ability to exercise it. Now, there are some problems here. Starting with this, voting is not a sacred universal right held by everyone. In fact, we don't treat it that way in this country even now, really. We don't let people under the age of 18 vote. We don't let felons vote. We do obviously think that there should be some parameters put in place to determine who can vote. At least most people think that. Our founding fathers thought that there should be even more parameters. Now, of course, for a long time in this country, women couldn't vote, black people couldn't vote, and that needed to be fixed, and it was. That doesn't mean, however, that we should have to do away with all of the barriers and obstacles and parameters that were put in place. So, yeah, you do away with the racial and gender-based obstacles, sure, but the original idea, only property owners vote. That is, only people with skin in the game, only contributing and competent members of society vote. That was good. That's how it should be. Take away all of the racial and gender elements of it, and the basic idea is a good one. Politicians, especially Democrats, though, want everyone to vote. They want to make it as easy as possible for everybody to vote. They want to make it so that you almost literally don't have to raise a finger yourself, lift a finger to vote. If they could come to your house and carry you to the polls like a baby, cradling you in their arms and humming lullabies the whole time, they would do that if they could. Why? Is it because they're just such huge fans of the democratic process Is it because they just really believe in, having people involved? No, it's because they benefit by having uninformed, lazy, stupid, non-contributing people voting. Those people are their people, right? That's their constituency. They need those voters. They don't just want those votes, they need them. The voters they don't want, though, are informed, intelligent, mature. I mean, the kind of voters that will be willing to make a sacrifice, the kind of voters that will, it's so important for them to participate that they'll carve out some time on the actual day of voting and go to the polls and do it. Now, these Democrats, those are the voters they don't want. But they can't stop those people from voting. So instead, they drown out their votes in a flood of stupid, in a flood of lazy and stupid. That's why they want a big turnout. Big turnout means that a lot more than just the informed and interested and invested people came out. It was exactly what they want. And that's why, while everybody cheers for big turnouts, I hope for small ones, much smaller. Ideally, there would be, 10 or 20 million people voting, tops. I mean, the really invested, the really informed, the really involved people. And if it was just them, America would transform for the better practically overnight in that scenario.